Mayor Allen, it is 6:30, so you may start the meeting at your convenience.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Can I have a mover and seconder, please, to do that? Councillor Moore and Councillor Maude Chapman, that the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of January 20, 2021 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. Due to COVID-19, Council is taking the necessary steps to limit in-person meetings. As such, members of Council will be participating in the meeting electronically, as will staff. The meeting is being live streamed, and you can watch the meeting live on the Township's website at www.springwater.ca. You can listen to the meeting live from a telephone by calling 647-558-0588 and using the meeting ID 883-3646-8070 on the pound sign. Or if you can't do either of those and you want to watch it later on, you can watch the live stream and review the meeting at your convenience by watching the video on the Township's YouTube channel, which is available on the website. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest tonight, Council? All right. We are item number 3, which is deputation and presentations. And tonight we have Mr. Jeff Kirk, who is a resident of Hillview Avenue in Ward 3, Springwater. He's joining us electronically via Zoom with a deputation on the Hillview Internet Broadband project. So we look forward to the presentation. Mr. Kirk.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Great. And can everyone see the presentation on their screen there?
We can see it and we can see you as well.
Excellent, excellent. So as Mayor Allen was saying, I'm Jeff Kirk. My day job, I'm a Director of Diagnostic Therapeutic Services at the Aurelia Hospital, but I'm here today as President of 2768271 Ontario Incorporated. We are the Hillview Internet Broadband Project. So a bunch of residents, Hillview, Gill Road, Crystalwood Lane got together in the summer, and we decided to talk about our inadequate broadband levels. And we agreed that they weren't sufficient. And so we decided to formulate a couple of strategies to make our situation better. Our first strategy was to convince a telco, and our second one was to build the infrastructure ourselves. So our convincing the telco strategy involved creating an inventory of the companies that operate within our geography, getting some financial data on what customers are paying to some companies that operate, what our speeds were. And so we asked residents to do some speed tests, and then we started reaching out to companies and having conversations. We did that through letter writing campaigns, emails, direct conversations, and we were pretty successful. We got one of the big telcos to include a project to bring some broadband down our neck of the woods, and they've committed to do that by around the end of 2023. And in looking at some of the service maps, we weren't quite satisfied. So we kept going with strategy number 2, which was building our own ISP. And so we formed a corporation. We worked with the CRTC to get some licensing. So one of our licenses is called a BITS license. Another is a reseller license. We engaged a consultant to help us find an area that had good broadband that we could bring up to our area. We then validated our costs to build out that infrastructure and made sure that our business case and our business plan was sound. At the end of December, we submitted a grant application, and if everything goes as planned, we believe that we can have broadband brought up to our community by 2021. So I want to show you guys the map of basically spring water. And on the map, there's blue areas, and those blue areas are right now meeting the minimum requirement for broadband. The CRTC says that folks should have 50 megabits of downloadable broadband, and so that's kind of the minimum threshold. So blue has it, red is planned. So new broadband developments are going to go into these areas. There's a lot of space that just has nothing, and so we hope through our plan that we can help make some of the nothing red. So I've gotten a lot of questions around cost and starting an ISP and trying to bring this plan to fruition. So I want to start by talking about what type of ISP we're going to be. We really believe in building the best. We only want to build the best, and the best is fiber. Running a fiber from the source right into customers' homes future-proofs you for many, many years, and gives levels of service that are going to be needed for watching Netflix and having your kids go to school. The cost of actually running fiber is pretty cheap. Fiber cable is about 50 cents a foot. And so, you know, the cable from downtown Midhurst to where we are is about 10 grand. But there's a lot more involved. And so our total project is about $500,000. 300,000 of that is being asked for through a grant source through the federal government. And then 200,000 of that is coming from debt and equity financing. And we are really setting this company up for the community to be able to take an ownership stake so it can be really community focused. So we are selling shirts. They're $10,000 a shirt. If anyone's interested, Clark Ainsworth is going to be able to help you there. They're just plain white. That was my one joke for the presentation. I hope it was good. So breaking the costs down a little bit more, the direct labor is a good portion of it. The materials are the majority, and then the equipment's actually not that expensive. And then the customers, they need to get a line that comes off of the transport line. That will also be fiber, and that's going to go right into their house. And so there are costs associated with, you know, that extra fiber run and the device that connects you. So we're not in the service provider business. And so what we did early on was we connected with a number of companies, and we found one that we really liked. And so we've got an agreement with them. They're established. They're not really operating within our area, but they've got an active base and 15 years in the industry. And so they're going to provide that end customer support for us. And we're trying to determine right now if that will be a white labeled service. So they'll act as our branded company, or whether we'll assume their branding. What are customers going to pay? And so when we did our research on this, we really spoke with the people that we're hoping to bring service to, and we got some costs, and there was quite the range. And so we don't want to overcomplicate things, so we're only going to have one plan, and it's the fastest plan, and it's the fastest plan because we're going to have speeds that are about 20 times what the CRTC recommends. The cost is going to be $120 a month. It's going to have unlimited uploads and downloads. We're not going to have hidden fees, and there's not going to be a contract. So the end user isn't going to enter in a 3 or 5 year long-term agreement to be able to bring this service. What we will have is a installation fee, and that's to cover the costs of bringing people in to run that cable from the transport line, you know, to the house. Now, if you live 20 kilometers away from where our transport line is, that number will be a little different. But we are really hoping to bring that number down quite a bit. So, but before I jump into the last piece, this has been about 6-7 months since this started. We're not network engineers. We're not ISP providers. We're just a community that's trying to solve our own problem. And I've seen that the community's got a great amount of grit, a great amount of perseverance. That they really want to see this through. And it's those personal attributes that I think will help make this project successful. And it's part of the reason that I'm here before you, because I think the more people that we can get on board and support the concept of better broadband, the better off we're going to be. I work in healthcare, so these are tough times for everybody. And I'm realistic. I know we might not be successful with this plan. But I do know that meeting with the community, getting to know my neighbors a little bit more, it's really been a beacon of light, if you will, during these dark times. So I've had a really good time, getting us to here, and I really hope we can see it to the end and get that better broadband for folks. So I proposed a motion, and I'm not quite sure of the logistics of this. So I won't read through this, but I'll give kind of the key points. I'm not looking for money. I'm looking for the township to support the concept of improved access to broadband for residents. And I'm also looking for the municipality, for the township, to help me navigate some of the more tricky components related to this project around easements and the permissions to actually run the cable. So Mayor Allen, I'll hand the podium or the presentation off to you.
Thank you. Very innovative, and kudos to you for taking this initiative. Just a little bit more on what the easement might require. Can you explain what you envision requiring an easement for, Jeff?
Yeah, yes, sure thing, Mayor Allen. So I need two 3-by-2 foot spots to put a telecommunication cabinet. And so one of those is at 47 Doran Road. And anyone familiar with that address, there is a telecommunication box that is already at that location. And I'm looking to put a box as close as I can to the one that currently exists. And that is the handoff point. That's where I'm getting a wholesale broadband connection. And it will, the cable will then run on Hydro One poles. And I have a joint use agreement with Hydro One that's just been finalized. And it's going to string up basically down Doran Road, up County Road 27, across Horseshoe Valley, and then down on Gill. And so my second box is going to be just off of Gill. I'd like it to be on Hillview Crescent. And again, it will be a standard green telecommunication box.
Okay. All right. Before I open up to questions, discussions, can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor, please? Councillor Mott Chapman and Councillor Cabral. Okay. Comments, questions, Council? Councillor Cabral, your yes card.
Mayor Allen, I just want to say that it's a very interesting presentation. It's nice to see that somebody's prepared to take it under their own kind of volition to get something accomplished. You are in a bit of a unique position where you are, that you have a significant number of neighbors and whatnot that are willing to jump on board and are also in close enough proximity to make it a worthwhile project. So I do appreciate that. I just would have, I guess, some concerns with respect, not concerns, that's not the right term I want to use. I think what I wanted to know was when you're talking about easements and right of ways, is it just those two specific ones that you're seeking, or are you looking down the road during expansion for other township involvement as far as helping acquire them?
Yeah, I can answer that, right? Our plan right now is just that one cable route. We don't have future development plans. If I could predict the future, I would like to make a loop. And so taking that same cable that's terminated on Gill, running it southbound down the length of Gill, going under or over the railroad tracks, and bringing it back around to Doran, back to the box, would give me a perfect redundant network, which would really make me happy. But there's also a lot going to be going on Gill in that area with some future developments. And so I haven't really thought past what's on my plate at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Hannah.
Speaker, thank you. Sorry, it takes me a while to find a little button to push there. Through the mayor to you, Mr. Kirk. I appreciate the fact that you want to go first class, but would it be any less expense to go with something a little more reasonable is my first question. And I just want to say it's also nice when somebody comes before council and wants to do something and doesn't want us to pay for it. So thank you for that.
Jeff?
So no, I'm not really interested in investing all this time and energy in providing kind of a second class solution. I look at, my neighbor pays $180 a month for 5 megabits of service and is capped at an 80 gig download. And I would eat through that in a couple of days. And so I think providing a far superior product for a cheaper price is the way to go. As far as infrastructure investments go, I'm looking at a $3,000 per premise passed, which is extremely competitive in the industry. I know that the geography has a lot to do with it. We are a little more dense than some of Springwater, but $6,000, $10,000, $15,000 per house passed is what other residents in Springwater are going to see for an inferior product. So I'm not going to save a ton by making it less. And so I might as well go all the way. Once that cable's run, that's really all we need.
Thank you, Councillor Ma Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and thank you, Mr. Kirk. I was at one of the gatherings that Mr. Kirk had about this at the very start before COVID, and he's put a lot of time and effort, and the neighbors around him totally supported all this. And I get it. We who have internet take it for granted. And now with people working from home, kids are at home, kids might be home longer. I think the township should support this just for supporting the township and going further with this, since Jeff has taken this on him and his other people there. And I think we should see this through and see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ma Chapman. Councillor Cabral. You're still muted, Councillor Cabral.
Mute.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Allen. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Kirk. I just wanted to ask you, with respect to, you said the pass by each particular house, you gave a figure of $15,000. I just wanted to know what exactly does that entail? Because that's significantly more than some of the numbers that the SWIFT per house or per connection, let's say, is looking at. And I'm wondering how that figures into it.
Yeah, and thank you for that. So, so our project, we're looking at about $3,000 per premises passed. In doing our research for geography such as ours, that where houses can be very far spread out, $15,000 per premises passed was at the higher end of that spectrum. So
Okay.
us, $3,000.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you, just a quick comment or I guess question before I would suggest that we can amend to move the motion presented. But with what pertaining to liability, if these boxes are put on township property and there's a car accident or something, how does the liability, is the incorporated company hold that, or is that on the municipality?
Jeff?
So I can speak to that. So there are two liability components that we've been advised on. The first is through Hydro One. And so for me to put a cable on their poles, my corporation needs to demonstrate a certificate of liability insurance and note that Hydro One is a beneficiary to that in the amount of $5 million. And we need to carry that as long as we've got the cable on the line. I haven't worked through the process yet with the municipality, but noting that Hydro's already requested that, I can't see the municipality having a requirement that is superior to that. And so if a car, hits it, the corporation would be liable, yes.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you. Just to clarify the easement agreement portion, there would be insurance requirements as part of that easement agreement, and it would be something similar to what Hydro is requesting. And it would be the corporation that would be the policy holder on that, and not Mr. Kirk or any of the residents individually. It would be the corporation.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie? Or did you have a follow-on, Deputy Mayor?
It's actually quite separate, but and also the community improvement plan that we do have, is there any portions of that might work with this initiative being brought forward by Kirk, or is it completely separate?
CEO Schmidt, do we have any funds, first of all, and would this potentially qualify for that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council and Deputy Mayor specifically. The CIP, the way it's structured right now, I don't believe would provide for this incentive, but through discussions with our Director of Planning, I think it's something that we could look at revising. Keep in mind that the funding that's available right now is capped at, I believe the original cap was around $50,000 for community improvement. That was the pot of money that was set aside, of which I believe the maximum amount that can be obtained by a business, if you will, was up to, I think, capped at $10,000, I think is the amount. But I see Director Spagnol's on the call here, and maybe he can provide further clarification.
Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think what staff will do is we can definitely take a closer look at the CIP to see if there's any additional programs or anything that can be provided in this instance. But I think CEO Schmidt pretty much hit the nail on the head that the CIP probably doesn't cover off this type of a venture.
Councillor Ritchie, then Councillor Cabral.
Two questions. We just got finished doing a financial study there prior to this meeting with the Medhurst secondary plan. So is your long range, are you looking to exploit this development in this Medhurst subdivision?
Jeff?
Maybe exploit wouldn't be a great word, but I do know that when developments go in, when they're doing their electrical contracting, is when the developer puts out a request to ISPs to participate in bringing fiber to the home. I know that's a little ways out, but if our company is successful, I would see that as an excellent opportunity for a community ISP to provide the fastest internet to residents of Midhurst.
It sounds promising, but I'd like a report before I think I would support this. I'd like to see a report come from staff and let them look at this a little more as to where the township's going to be regarding liability. Are we partnering up? Like, what support do we give? Like, I mean, it sounds good, but I want more information before I can support this. Thank you.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you. Prior to any easement agreements being enacted with this corporation, it would have to come back to council. So council would be aware of what all of the liability limits are. It would be vetted through legal prior to it going to council. So this approval, receipt of this delegation, and then possibly subsequently approval of the motion that Mr. Kirk is presenting wouldn't be the end all where council would see it. There would be further reports coming to council prior to anything else happening.
Councillor Cabral? You just muted yourself.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just with respect to that, right now, to be quite honest with you, Mr. Kirk, I do admire your efforts, but really I see you as a corporation now. And basically you're going to be providing internet service to people who wish to avail themselves of it. I can certainly see that maybe making things a little bit easier, providing some guidance as far as working with the township. But to be quite frank with you, and I hope you don't take this the right way, I see internet and the provision of that service a federal responsibility. They're putting a lot of money into it, as is the provincial government. So outside of that, and there's been talk about the community improvement plan, I really don't see. And the thing is, you haven't asked for it. You're not looking for any financial support. So I'm a little bit kind of thinking to myself, if you're not asking for financial support, why are some council members all of a sudden looking to provide it? I'm not in favor of providing financial support for the provision of internet services in the township, but I am in favor of supporting you in other ways if it's at all possible. So I just want to make my position clear. I don't want to see council or the township spending money that we don't have.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Coughlin, did you have a comment?
No, sorry, I guess it was just clarification that as it is an incorporated company and the program already exists, I wasn't sure if that's what it was. I'm not suggesting that we all of a sudden become in the internet providing business, but at the same time, if there is an initiative, much like all the other services that already exist in the township, and as they move forward, I mean, every time we have a development or a new lot even built, we have comment from Enbridge and Bell on it. So this is simply a different provider. So I would like to see that this move forward and we move to the next step where we do receive information through a staff report as to what the next steps would be for the municipality.
So are you proposing an amendment then, Deputy Mayor?
Well, just to receive, and then we can move the resolution that was provided.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Ma Chapman. Any further comment? Councillor Cabral?
Oh, thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm just curious with respect to this resolution. Are we speaking about the resolution that's part of Mr. Kirk's presentation? Because it's fairly encompassing. I would suggest that we simply receive the report and forward it to staff to see how these easements and what guidelines we might be able to provide to assist Mr. Kirk in moving forward.
And I believe that the amendment was to incorporate the motion that was in the presentation. CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to members of council. So just want to clarify, and maybe Mr. Kirk, you can follow up if I'm incorrect in what I'm saying here. I don't believe Mr. Kirk is looking for any financial assistance by the township. He's an incorporated corporation that has a project that he's looking to move forward with, and would like the township to support him. And I don't mean, he's going to be a corporation. If he needs easements, he's, as the clerk mentioned, he'll have to come in like any other applicant, and we'll walk through the process of an easement agreement. And to the extent that there's legal fees and or other fees associated with drafting those agreements, then Mr. Kirk's corporation would be responsible for payment of all of that. Really, I think, I have had many conversations with Mr. Kirk, and I do appreciate the information he's provided over the last number of months, updating us on this project. And really at this, we've been working together on a couple of things and trying to bring myself up to speed on this initiative. But really at the end of the day, I think it's just a matter of him looking to support for a community that wants to move forward with the project. And I think, to the extent that the township, he's looking for a couple of easements, well, then he would have to follow through that same process like anybody else. And if there's fees associated with it and liability and or insurance requirements, then those would all have to be satisfied through agreements that would have to come to council for ultimate approval, I think. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
Okay, Councillor Moore, and then Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The only concern I have is on the last page of Mr. Kirk's presentation, related to the motion where it says the municipal, provincial, and federal governments provide various funding sources, and so to improve the access to broadband. I don't really love that sentence, so I'd like to know what it is you're referring to about the municipality providing various funding sources then, if you're not looking for money.
Jeff?
So thank you, Councillor Moore. Deputy Mayor Conlon referenced a small fund that I noticed was available for basically signage and local improvements. I am not anticipating approaching the municipality for any level of funding. My funding application for $300,000 has been submitted to the federal government, and I have both debt and equity sources completely secured. My hope is that my grant application increases in strength by being able to demonstrate that I have community support, and I can think of no better way to demonstrate that community support than the 80 letters that have been written by the local group that I represent, and having a motion of support by the township that we live in. And so when it comes to dollars and cents, I'm really not looking for that. I will say my background isn't in easements and that sort of thing, and so Clerk Ainsworth has been quite helpful to date, and it is quite the process. But I got through the Hydro 1 joint use agreement, so I'm pretty sure I can handle anything at this point.
Follow on, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So I support what you're doing. I think it's a great initiative, and your neighbors, I'm sure, are very impressed with all the hard work and the effort. It's a lot. But I'm wondering if you would be willing then to just take out that piece of your motion that you're putting forward, where it says the municipality would provide various funding sources.
Yeah, and if it says provide, I apologize. That really wasn't the intent.
Okay.
Councillor Cabral, did you have a follow on? Then Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just wondering about how appropriate it is for us to vote on a motion that was drafted by someone making the delegation. I'm just wondering, Mr. Kirk, did you get any assistance in drafting this particular motion? Because there's just a few points in it, such as what Councillor Moore has pointed out, that I just don't feel comfortable with. I certainly am supportive. I like the part here about down the road, if this comes to fruition, providing you maybe with a letter of support, whether it was on council's behalf or just township's behalf, as you say here, to the Federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. I think that would probably help your cause. However, I don't feel comfortable voting on this particular motion the way it's written in your presentation itself. So once again, I'd love to see it be received, but I would like to have it be a little bit more open to hear back from staff about these easements and permissions before I would feel comfortable voting on the motion the way it's written there. I hope you understand that.
Yeah, you had a lot in there. In getting to the table here, I worked closely with Clerk Ainsworth, and she basically provided me the delegation package, and we had a bit of a back and forth on what a motion could look like. I did some research. I based my motion off of motions of other similar municipalities that have gone through and passed motions supporting broadband. It sounds like from this group that the easement and the kind of logistics around that are a sticking point. And frankly, when I approach the township tomorrow to receive help on my easements, I know the township's going to provide that. And so I'm happy to drop that component from my request. What I'm really looking for is recognition that broadband is important for the community, and that Springwater supports the concept of bringing better broadband to the people.
Okay, Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor. And I have concerns with receiving approving the recommendation. But again, we're all in support of this. I believe the appropriate thing we should be doing is receiving the delegation period, get a staff report, and then put forward a recommendation to provide a letter of support at that time, and maybe even worded stronger than that. But to receive the delegation now and provide a letter report before getting a report from staff, I don't think is correct. However, that's just my opinion, and maybe the clerk could provide direction on that. But I do think that we need to receive this. We're obviously all in support of it, but we need to do it correctly.
Clerk Ainsworth, any comment before I go to Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, through you to council. The process of the easement agreement is fairly straightforward, fairly common. It won't really deal too much with council's support of the project overall. It'll strictly deal with the fact of putting the two green infrastructure boxes within the road allowance. I'm not too sure where that would be in the process. We're still just in preliminary discussions with Mr. Kirk about that. I believe if what I'm hearing from council, as Mr. Kirk had mentioned, if he came into the office tomorrow, requested help with attaining an easement, it would be provided without a support from council. That's just common practice that we do with various other utility providers. So if that is kind of a sticking issue on Mr. Kirk's resolution, removing that where staff is directed to work on those. The rest of the resolution is strictly just providing, as he's mentioned, providing support for broadband within the community and the project that he is proposing within his community. It doesn't force the municipality into any partnerships or agreements. It's strictly just a motion of support. It's commonly seen in other municipalities where organizations will provide the wording that they are seeking on motions. We don't see that very often in Springwater, but it's a very common practice amongst other municipalities.
Councillor Ritchie.
Two questions, Mayor Allen. To Mr. Kirk, do you plan on putting this presentation, do you plan on going before county council with this?
It was not my intent to go before county council, but certainly something that I will bring back to the team and discuss with them.
Second question, the county, the province, federal government have been all allocating money towards internet in the province and in Simcoe County. One concern that I have, and which is good, One concern that I have by supporting you, does that forfeit our right then to make application for grant money that the province and the federal government has been putting available to provide internet in Springwater Township? So that's a concern that I have. But we support you. Does that forfeit our right to, in order to apply for grant money for ourselves? For, we got to look at the whole township. I know I've got issues in Hillsdale, Phelpson. There's lots of the rural areas around here. And so again, I have a concern with that. Do we forfeit our right? And that's something, again, I'd like to see a report from staff on. Thank you.
Councillor, I can answer that for you. So the township wouldn't be precluded from supporting others. And the fact that, Bell, Rogers already operate in the municipality and have easements tells me that council's already supported those businesses. So by not supporting me, you're really putting a disadvantage to the residents that are looking for this. So I'm just really looking for Springwater to support the concept of broadband and to help promote it through all mechanisms that you have available, and really just try to bring better broadband to the community.
Yeah, CAO Schmidt, this wouldn't preclude us from doing any other initiatives with respect to community broadband based on what your research has been. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. My understanding is that if support was to be provided to Mr. Kirk in his business, it's my understanding it wouldn't impact us. The challenge, and you'll see it in the later report on this evening's agenda, is the challenge that the township has is in trying to partner. Because we haven't partnered with anybody, whether it be Mr. Kirk or somebody else, an ISP that is in the business, we're really handcuffed in regards to applying for any funding that's out there. So again, that's something obviously council will discuss later tonight on the agenda, but that's the only thing I see as hampering us if in applying for any funding is that we don't have the experience, and a lot of the criteria that's required for these funding applications is to partner and or have experience in this industry, if you will, which obviously we don't have. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Clerk Ainsworth, we've got an amendment on the floor which involves this motion with a couple of suggested adjustments. Can you help us out there?
Thank you. Through you to council and to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Based on the conversations, I've taken a few liberties to amend the motion slightly, recommending an amendment, which would remove the portion, the paragraph where it would request support from staff or help from staff, and make it so that it's a generic support for broadband as well as support in principle for this project. So I'll read the amendment, and should council wish to see anything different.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Yes, thank you. And then the last paragraph too that Councillor Moore asked to have removed.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just to go along with Councillor Moore's one sentence, instead of taking the whole thing out, can we just take out the municipality and leave the province and the federal?
Well,
Yes, we could do that.
Thank you. Mayor Allen. That first paragraph I did amend as a recommendation, whereas provincial and federal governments provide various funding sources to improve access to broadband. That way it removes any indication of municipality.
Okay. All right. You wouldn't have that to put up on the screen, would you, Clerk Ainsworth?
If you give me a moment, I could try that. One moment.
Okay. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm not sure that we can make that decision on behalf of the provincial and federal government. By making that change, you're saying, whereas the provincial and federal government will provide various funding sources to improve access to broadband.
No, I don't think that would be the, I don't think that would be the wording, but we'll wait. She's Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. Yeah, it would just be a generic statement that provincial and federal governments do provide various funding. It's not requesting them to provide funding. It's just making a statement that they do currently provide funding for this type of project.
Okay, so you're putting this up on the screen.
So I wanna vote yes.
Your mic's on there, Councillor Cabral.
Oh.
We'll wait to see the green card up then. Okay, we'll let you read through it then, please, Clerk.
Thank you. Are you seeing the screen where it has part of the motion?
Yes, we're seeing the screen.
Okay. So it would read, whereas provincial and federal governments provide various funding sources to improve access to broadband, and whereas the Southwestern Integrated Fiber Technology, SWIFT, is one such funding source and is a nonprofit regional broadband project that in the fall of 2020 announced funding to provide improved broadband access to approximately 12,700 households and businesses across Simcoe County. And whereas an open and competitive broadband landscape benefits Springwater residents and businesses. And whereas 2768271 Ontario Incorporated is an internet service provider, ISP, operating in Midhurst, Ontario, that came into existence through the communities of Hillview Crescent, Gill Road, and Crystalwood Lane. Interest to improve access to broadband. And whereas 2768271 Ontario Incorporated has actively pursued funding sources and submitted an application to run fiber optic cable from downtown Midhurst to rural Midhurst and into residents' households, known a fiber to the premise. This project is called the Hillview Broadband Project through the Federal Universal Broadband Fund. And whereas a fiber connection is the fastest and best technology available for broadband, and FTTH is the best service that can be provided to Springwater residents. Be it therefore resolved that the Township of Springwater supports improved access to broadband in Springwater and support in principle the Hillview Broadband Project, and further that this motion be shared with the Federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, MP Doug Shipley, and the Honorable Doug Downey.
Okay, thank you. All right then, all those in favor of this motion? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Kirk, and good luck with getting this happening.
Sorry, Mayor Allen, before I go, any shirts? Any purchases for shirts? I appreciate your time. Oh, wait, we got one. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great night, guys.
Okay, thank you. All right, Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. As that was an amendment, there would still need to be a vote on the main motion as amended.
Okay, do we have to read the whole thing out, or you go ahead and handle proposing it, please? The motion is made by Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Seconder on that?
Oh.
Councillor Moore, or sorry, Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Councillor Chapman has already moved the main motion, and Councillor Cabral had seconded the main motion.
Okay. Okay. Is there any comment then before we vote on it? Okay. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to question period is item 4. Members of the public can ask questions of council or make comments on the agenda. They need to be submitted to the clerk by noon, I believe, the day of the meeting, or request to make them virtually online. Clerk Ainsworth, were there any questions presented?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. No questions have been submitted.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5.1. We have a series of minutes. Can I have a mover and second to get these on the floor, please? Councillor Cabral and Councillor Moore. Any comments with respect to 1 through 7? Okay, seeing none, that the minutes of the council listed herein be approved as presented. The special meeting, November 23rd, 25th, November 30th, December 7th, December 9, 2020, regarding the 2021 budget. The special meeting of council, December 4, 2020. The special meeting of council, December 16, 2020. Special meeting of council closed session of December 16, 2020. The minutes of the regular meeting of council, December 16, 2020. The meeting of council, special meeting of council, December 21, 2020. The special meeting of council closed session of December 21, 2020. All those in favor? That is carried. Item 5.2. Minutes of the special meeting of council, closed session of December 16, 2020, and the minutes of the special meeting of council, closed session, December 21, 2020. Clerk Ainsworth, there's no motion with respect to those. 5.2, 5.3.
That's correct. They were included in the previous motion.
Okay, thank you. Next, we move on to 5.4, the minutes of board committees and organizations. Mover and seconder to get those on the floor, please. Councillor Ma and Deputy Mayor Coughlin, any questions, comments about minutes 1 through 4? Okay, the minutes of the Elmvale BIA board meeting, October 15, 2020. Springwater Township Public Library board meeting, November 17, 2020. The Cultural Advisory Committee meeting of November 3rd, 2020. And the Springwater Township Public Library board meeting of December 2nd, 2020. All those in favor? That is carried. Correspondence and information items. We have item 6.1, which is a piece of correspondence that was in the CIP regarding the Royal Canadian Legion Ontario Command 8th Annual Military Service Recognition Book, and their request for our continued support as we've done in the past. The agenda has me moving that, but Councillor Ma Chapman has kindly agreed to move that. So she is moving this as stated in 6.1. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Moore. And the motion is that the request from the Royal Canadian Legion to advertise in its 8th Annual Military Service Recognition Book in the amount of $570 be hereby approved. Any questions with respect to this? All those in favor? That is carried. Turning to item 7, we have action reports. And we have action reports 7.2 through to 7.9. Would anybody like to ask questions or pull any of these? Councillor Ritchie?
7.7, there's additional residential units. I'd like to pull it.
7.7. Councillor Moore? You're muted, Councillor Moore.
Sorry, 7.4, please.
Councillor Hannah?
Sorry about that. 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4, please.
And you'd like those pulled or questions?
Just questions, I thank you.
And I didn't ask that of Councillor Moore. 7.4 questions or pulled?
Pulled, please.
And Councillor Ritchie, 7.7 pulled or questions?
Pulled.
Councillor Cabral.
7.9, because it appears that we need to discuss it anyway.
Yes, so we'll pull 7.9. Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Hannah, 7.2, 7.3 questions.
Thank you. Through you, I guess, to, I think it was the deputy clerk, put the report in on the cemetery and services. I guess I have questions is relating to the amount of availability and for burial interment within Springwater, given that I understand there are some private cemeteries, but this one in Midhurst, which is the only active one that Springwater Township looks after, I think it said in the report it only has room for 90 more internments. 90 sounds like a lot today, but given what's going on with COVID and et cetera, and the growth in our community, my question is, one, are the only residents of Springwater allowed to be interned within Springwater Township? My first question.
Deputy Clerk Helmke, please. Oh, sorry. I see Clerk Ainsworth. Maybe we'll start with her.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be answering questions based on for this report. It is not just Springwater residents that can be buried at the Midhurst Cemetery. And in regards to the availability of lots, these lots were expanded last year through phase 1 of the cemetery expansion. There's phase 2 that is planned, as well as phase 3 over the next 10 years. And phase 2 is currently planned for 2023, but that will depend on how quick the current lots sell. So that will be a moving number depending on if the lots sell up quicker or if they take longer to sell. It might be pushed back further, but there is a plan to expand it twice more over the next 10 years.
Thank you. You answered my second question already. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on this? 7.3 then, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. My question on 7.3 is the time period. I remember being on council when this first came forward and we agreed to the statutory holidays and also the staff being off during Christmas and New Year's. At that time, the discussion was that the period of time that they were off between Christmas and New Year's, they used either credits that they had from overtime or annual leave or something to compensate those days off. There's no indication in this report how those 2.5 days in between Christmas and New Year's are accredited to staff. So I just want to make clear that anybody that's looking at this, staff aren't getting a week's annual leave. They do compensate for that time off through credits that they have or vacation leave.
Okay, thank you. I see CEO Schmidt came on the line. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's correct. Councillor Hannah's comment, it is credits that are utilized by staff for this time.
Okay. All right then. So we have a mover and seconder for the motions that haven't been pulled, so that the recommendations contained therein be approved. And that is 7.2 Cemetery Services RFP 220-21, 7.3 2021 Public Holiday and Year-End Holiday Office Closure, 7.5 FCM Asset Management Grant Application for Facilities Assessment Study, 7.6 ZB 220-014 regarding Stone Manor Woods, Yorkwood Phase 4, 7.8 updated water financial plan with the exception of 7.4, 7.7 and 7.9, which have been pulled. All those in favor? Clerk Ainsworth has something to say first.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. We do require a mover and seconder for that motion.
I thought we had that. Sorry. Councillor Cabral's got that up, and seconder, Councillor Deputy Mayor Coughlin. All those in favor? And those are carried. Okay, going to in order of number 7.4. I believe you pulled that, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you to the CAO. I realized looking at the report that this has already been awarded, and I know that you probably do this routinely. But now that we are going to have the second efficiency audit done later this year, or maybe sooner rather than later, would it not be better for us to defer this until we have the results of the efficiency audit, which would help us to know if we have enough staff or not enough staff? And I'm hoping that we get more detail with that efficiency audit also. So I'd like your thoughts on that. I don't know if the efficiency audit will provide us compensation, but at least it might help to decide if where the township is moving and what kind of staffing we're going to need.
CAO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Moore. So to your point, Councillor Moore, we haven't done the township hasn't done a full-blown comprehensive compensation review in quite some time. So I know that our pay equity, so part of this compensation review is not just strictly compensation. It's pay equity, it's job evaluation, it's reviewing job descriptions and making sure that everything's up to snuff, if you will. So, you know, our manager of HR, again, is on the line here. She can provide further information, but the intent is that the last pay equity, I believe, that we've done was back in 2001. So we're well overdue for that review. In addition, the job evaluation hasn't been updated in quite some time as well. And so that portion needs to be completed as well. As for the compensation piece, the compensation would be essentially looking at how the township measures up with our neighboring municipalities and determining how competitive we are with retaining staff and or attracting staff. All of members of council may recall last year when we were trying to recruit for a director of recreation, we had a bit of an issue with trying to hire somebody due to compensation. And most recently, you know, another director position, we had a conversation about compensation. As it relates to the efficiency audit, you know, at this stage, we don't know what the scope of that audit is. We need to come back to council and get a better sense, with all due respect, as to what areas we need to kind of do an efficiency audit on. We are obviously scheduled in March to have a conversation about a follow-up conversation to what happened with the service delivery review in the fall of last year. And then hopefully there'll be further scoping of what an efficiency audit might look like. So, you know, the timeline for this, it would be that likely, I know in the RFP when it was originally structured, the timeline was to try to have this completed by the end of May. But that was, I believe, on the basis that it was awarded in late 2020. So I can see that the timing of this review will likely span probably into July or August of this year. And hence, you know, the information will be coming to council at that time for a final decision. So I'm not sure if that helps answer your question, but that's kind of the game plan, if you will.
Just before I go back to you for follow-on, Councillor Moore, Manager DeVries.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Moore, one of the main components would be a new job evaluation tool, which would allow us to evaluate any new positions kind of going forward to ensure that the township is paying them fairly compared to other internal positions. So we want to make sure that we have internal equity and we're fairly compensating our internal positions. So if we went through the efficiency review and it was determined that we need future staff, the job evaluation tool would allow us to properly evaluate any new positions going forward. The tool we have in place right now and our current salary grid was from 2002. There's limitations with it where we don't have enough points to properly evaluate some of the positions that we have right now. So that's one way that we would be, one goal out of the compensation review that we're hoping to achieve.
Follow on, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, so moving forward, I just want to know that if we decided to defer this just till later in the year, till after we have that efficiency audit, would there be a penalty to the township because it already has been awarded, or have they not been advised of being awarded this? But I'm assuming that they have. So wondering where we're at if we were to defer it.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Moore. So it hasn't been awarded. That's essentially what tonight is about, is seeking council's approval of award. So if you do not award it, obviously we'd be contacting the various players and indicating that it hasn't been awarded. I'd have to take a look at the language that's in the RFP. Typically when we have outs, if you will, or we have avenues, if you will, to be able to not award. However, we'd have to take a look at reasonings as to why we wouldn't award, and it might involve a conversation with the individual that we're looking at awarding to tonight to see whether or not they would entertain their pricing that they have today. It could change. Typically, the pricing is only in place for 90 days, so it allows us the 90 days to evaluate and come to council and award. So there's a couple of things that we would have to see if you're looking at, if you're looking at allowing us to award to this individual but defer the work to later in the year. That might be more acceptable to them. Again, there's a couple of options there, I guess, that I've thrown out. But again, it's not a budget issue because it is within budget. So we'd have to come up with some kind of reasoning as to why we're not going to award. And if it's just simply to defer it, then again, that might be a conversation with this individual, assuming that council is agreeing to go with this individual or this consulting firm. Sorry.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Hannah and Councillor Ritchie, but before I do, I'm also hearing rumblings about possible unionization initiatives. So we have to keep that in mind, because I think we all take pride that we don't have a union, and this is overdue to take a look at this, and I would certainly not want to have a union come in based on a combination of reasons, this being one of them potentially. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor. That concerns me, that conversation. I'm not sure that's, well, anyway. I do support Councillor Moore's suggestion that we do it in a sequence that would require us to defer this, do the efficiency audit, and then use the material from the efficiency audit possibly to support this compensation review, keeping in mind that any compensation that was going to take place, the discussion would take place during our next audit, our next budget deliberations for 2022. So I don't think deferring it would be too much of an impact, as long as we're able to do it with and retain the costing that we've already received for the $50,000 to do it. I do support, though, the motion to do it in the what I would call the correct sequence.
CL Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess one of the other things I forgot to mention is there is the possibility of moving forward with this, and then with the final recommendations, whatever those might be, is deferring those recommendations and or phasing those recommendations, whatever they may be, to the 2022 budget, and or possibly it could be 2023 budget, depending on what the results are. Keeping in mind, again, so the efficiency audit, we don't know the scope of the audit at this stage. This is really to look at our current compensation. It's not to add bodies. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that, as our manager of HR mentioned, is making sure that we're evaluating jobs correctly, which we have an old tool and not necessarily the best. Making sure that we are paying, individuals equally, whether they're a male or female in a position, making sure that they're being compensated correctly, as well as ensuring that the township it remains competitive in the local market when we go out and try to retain or recruit new staff and or to retain staff. That's really what this is about. So with this exercise, we could still continue with the exercise. It's just the recommendations could be deferred until the efficiency audit is completed. And if we are going to have a discussion in March and we determine what the scope of the efficiency audit is, depending on how specific that audit is, it could be done possibly in a month or two's time, again, depending on the magnitude of that audit.
Councillor Ritchie, then Councillor Cabral.
2 questions. In our second term, and CEO Smith would know because he was in finance, did we not have some kind of a look at the wages in order to top them up to keep us competitive? Because we were having the same issues then. So I believe in our second term from 214 to 218, there was a look. We did do a top up. Maybe you could be a little bit more specific on the timing of that.
And your second question?
Well, the second question is if we can go ahead and award it to these, if you think they're the ones that should be doing it. But I'd like to see, if that's the case, then we need to move forward as quickly as possible with the efficiency audit, lay out the groundwork and get going on it, which would then tee up with this here about the increase in pay for the people in that. So deferring it.
CAO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Ritchie. So it's my understanding, and again, our manager may have to help me out here. My understanding was I think there was a review of the salaries. I don't know if it was a full-blown compensation review. It was simply, I know there was a number of positions that were reevaluated, and I believe those were some of the positions that were maybe, we have a scale of, our pay scale goes from a level 1 to 10, and I believe there's a number of positions that were on the lower end of the levels, if you will, that were adjusted to become more in line with a competitive rate. But I don't believe it was a full-blown review. But again, our manager of HR might be able to speak further to that.
Manager DeVriend.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through to Councillor Ritchie. Correct. We did conduct a compensation review in 2017. However, it was only a market survey, so it only looked at our positions relative to the market, and if we were paying to external, it only looked at the compensation externally, and if we were paying barely into the external market. So it never looked at the compensation internally. So it didn't look at the value of the positions and compare positions internally. That hasn't been done actually since 2007. So as part of compensation, there's different components. So you have external compensation. So you want to make sure that you're paying to the market, you're paying competitively. You want to make sure you're not overpaying or underpaying relative to what other people in the market are paying. And then the internal equities, you want to make sure that jobs of equal value are being paid to the organization, are being paid fairly within the organization. So we haven't done that since 2007. The 2017 one only looked at certain positions in the organization and if we were paying them at an appropriate rate to the market.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm just curious with respect to the efficiency audit. Since we don't know the scope, I'm sure we could tailor the scope and see whether or not the efficiency audit is going to be looking at the jobs, going to be looking at how they're being done. I kind of could see that maybe doing the efficiency audit and then providing this consultant for the compensation comparison, that information might actually serve a very good purpose in that order. So I kind of thinking that that might be the appropriate way to go. I don't anticipate, and CAO Schmidt can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. You can too, if you like, Mayor Allen. But I don't anticipate that there's going to be a change in compensation during this year, or am I mistaken in assuming that?
Well, we can't answer that unless council agrees to that. So there's none planned at this moment. CAO Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Cabral. So yeah, further to the mayor's comment, again, through this review, there would be, that analysis completed. And to the extent that there was a suggestion or a recommendation for an increase in compensation, then part of this analysis would be for the consultant to provide a financial report, if you will, as to how to phase in any type of compensation increases and or changes in compensation. Now, with that said, and I'm sure the manager of HRs wants to pipe in here, from a pay equity standpoint, if it's determined that there's some discrepancies with pay equity, those we would be required to essentially compensate right away. We don't have a choice on those particular items. So, but beyond that, the part of this review, again, it requires the consultant to provide the financial impacts and how to potentially phase those in over a period of time. And again, council ultimately has approval to agree with that or not. So,
Councillor Moore. Follow on first, Councillor Cabral.
Just a real quick one, Mayor Allen. I wasn't suggesting anything in respect of compensation increases, but seeing as we've already adopted and gone with our budget for 2021, I was just kind of making the assumption the only increases would be increases based on merit and pay grade going forward until we got to 2022. So that's kind of what I was looking for clarification on, Mayor Allen.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you, please, then, to Manager DeVried. Have we to this point had any complaints of pay equity issues? Has anyone brought forward concerns about pay inequities?
Through Mayor Allen to Councillor Moore, not at this time. There have been no formal pay equity complaints to the commission or through to myself, but that doesn't preclude someone from making a complaint at any time.
Follow on.
Thank you. So, and I trust that the township runs very professionally in that way, and I hoped and expected that you would answer that way. So I'm really just suggesting that we defer, and we can award this contract if council approves, and defer it until after the efficiency audit. And during that conversation, we can ask to be somewhat specific about the positions and them also reviewing our complement of staff, not necessarily compensation, but just complements of staff. And then I think it'll help me particularly make a decision moving forward.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through yourself to, I guess, CAO Schmidt. Considering that the top three proponents of this RFQ were all within 1, maybe even 2 points, is there not a provision in our procurement bylaw that prevents or permits council to, if we're looking for that, as you said, it is in our budget and whatnot, but isn't there something in our bylaw that allows us the opportunity not to award if it's that close?
CAO Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. So typically when you go out with an RFP, and I would, I'll mention this now because I'm sure it's going to come up in item 7.9. So typically when you go out with an RFP, it's a formal bid process. So you're essentially engaging in a contract, right? So that's what you're looking for. And so we went out, we had 7 or whatever the number was bid, and they essentially have entered into, in all intents and purposes, a contract with us. And so the idea is that, unless we don't have budget, unless they don't meet the merits of the project of the RFP, then I'm not quite sure why we wouldn't award. Keep in mind, this has been in the budget for 3 years. This was before my time, and it wasn't done in previous CAO's term. and it got brought forward last year, and obviously with the changes in positions, it didn't get done, and it was again put back into the 2020 budget, and of course this other thing called COVID hit us, and we haven't been able to obviously do it then due to other priorities, and then it got rolled into the 2021 budget. So we're essentially moving forward with what was approved, if you will, through the budget. And again, my thoughts is to try to protect the municipality to some degree and I would hope none of these individuals will come back at us, but is as I mentioned, the safe way might be to award, but then discuss the time frame of when the actual work would be completed by this individual. So if we award tonight and we go back to the consultant and say, listen, the time frame of this is we don't want, we're looking to engage this in May or June, and with a finalization in October, November, December, or I guess November, in time for the budget for 2022. Should there be any implications, then maybe that's something that we could likely do. And then at that time, we would have the information from the efficiency audit, and to the extent that there's any implications from that audit, it could be considered through this process.
Thank you, Councillor Cabral, and then we'll take it to vote.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I guess through you to CEO Schmidt. When I was looking this over, I was, I guess they're so close. 92.7, 92, 91.2, especially with respect to the 92.7 and 92. Is there any light that you can share that kind of swayed staff to basically recommend ML Consulting over the other two? Was there some particular thing that maybe kind of slanted it in their favor? Because we as council don't see exactly what the process was in the background, but these are so close, it's a wonder why we didn't just flip a coin. So I just want to know if you can shed any light on why one was selected over the other, that be helpful.
Manager DeVries.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, maybe I'll take that. I think Councillor Cabral sought my response on that. So technically, what happens is the RFP is typically, there's a technical portion whereby the evaluation committee, made up of 3 or 5 or 7 people. In this case, it was 3 people. Essentially, they evaluate all the submissions based on typically 4 different criteria. So company overview and project team, the qualifications is another, and qualifications of the team. Also, the understanding, do they actually understand what we're seeking in the RFP? Do they have a good work plan? And then typically the last item, the 4th item is their schedule of work and whether or not they can actually meet the time frame that's suggested in the RFP. So that typically makes up about 75% of the marks. And these 3 individuals, I think 4 of them maybe came in fairly close. They were probably within 0.9 of a difference. So the remaining 25% is financial. And so really what it comes down to is the financial piece. So they all have really the technical skills to do the job. But what it comes down to in most times is the financial component of it. So whoever comes in with the lowest score essentially gets the highest mark, and then everybody else gets a portion of those 25 marks as you work your way along the pricing. So that's how the points came out. And the evaluation team doesn't get to see the pricing. So we have to provide our evaluations to the procurement and claims administrator, who takes all of our scores. The 3 of us or the 4 of us meet. We have a consensus meeting so that we can all agree to the numbers as it relates to the technical. And then once we determine what those technical scores are, then the administrator will open up the envelopes, the financial envelopes, and determine what the scoring is from there, and then provide the group with the final scores. So we don't get involved in the financial piece of it. That's just the administrator open the envelope and determining what those numbers are. So hopefully that gives you a better sense of how that process works, and that's ultimately how the scores were calculated.
Thank you. I certainly support this. I think that we've got to award this. I think the suggestion of deferring exercising it until we at least get underway and maybe do in conjunction the efficiency audit is got some benefit as well. But to kick this into next year, I think we have to have this input certainly for our next budgeting process, and it should get underway now. Can I have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please? I see two requests to speak, Councillor Cabral and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just wanted to clarify, is the motion going to be just to accept it as is, or is the motion going to be to accept the report and defer the implementation to a later date that council decides on?
Well,
I just want to know going forward, because it'll change how I'm going to vote.
Yes, no, if the mover wants to put forward an amendment to the motion, they can raise it as such.
Yeah.
Councillor Moore?
Oh, sorry. I was speaking out loud.
Okay.
Sorry, no, I still want to speak. I didn't realize I was not on mute. I would like to then put forward an amendment to this motion to do that, if I may.
Let's just pause for a sec. I see Clerk Ainsworth, maybe she's got a process comment. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We still do need a mover and seconder for the original motion prior to an amendment being proposed.
Okay, so I just gave you some misinformation. So let's get it on the floor with the mover and seconder. Councillor Cabral, Councillor Moore. And we see what it is there. And Councillor Moore, you'd like to propose an amendment?
So the amendment would be to award the contract this evening to the company that was recommended, and then ask them to defer until after we've had a chance to review and consult regarding the efficiency audit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Hannah, any discussion, comment about that? Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Not to open a can of worms, but I just want some input from CAO Schmidt with respect to that particular proposal from ML Consulting. Would they be in a position to work with us on it down the road? I just kind of want to get a sense whether or not, I mean, obviously when they put in their proposal, they would have suggested to us that they would work on our time schedule. I just want to confirm that.
CAO Schmidt?
Through you to Councillor Cabral. So Councillor Cabral, I can't speak for them, but definitely, we haven't awarded to them, so we haven't had any discussion with them. But the intent would be is if council is accepting of the amendment tonight, Manager DeVried and or myself will get in touch with the consultant and just indicate to them that indicate the timing of the adjusted timing that council wants us to go, and should there be any pushback, if you will, from that consultant, then we'll have to report back to council. But I'm assuming that they would hopefully be flexible in their schedule and be able to accommodate us.
So, Clerk Ainsworth, and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just for clarification, through you to CAO Schmidt, how would you like this worded to ensure that we are still following the requirements of the RFP? So far, I have that it would be the main motion as you read, but with the addition of, and that the commencement of the review be postponed until after the service delivery review. Or is there anything else that you would recommend be added to that?
CAO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Clerk Ainsworth. I'll be honest, I think I've heard what council wants, and so in my mind, I think I have enough to go by. Again, I think it's a matter of, we know in September, in March, we'll be coming to have a discussion with council on the service delivery review. And to me, it's at that time that we have a discussion about the efficiency audit and determine the scope. And I don't see that this project is going to be starting anytime before May or June of this year.
So are you, so what are you saying with respect to the wording that Clerk Ainsworth is proposing?
I'm fine with that. I understand. I believe, unless any member of council is not in agreement with what I just stated, the idea would be is we'd probably be deferring this until at least May or June of this year.
Well, I think that's what we've been talking about. So anybody need it read again? Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Marilyn. And I guess it's just a comment. My first question would be, it was mentioned earlier that it would be beneficial to have this information as part of. So if we have two different consultants seeking information that is all part of a whole, to me, the efficiency audit is going to be more substantial, understanding as Manager DeVries said, the internal components versus the external components. So to me, I guess my first question is, what was the timeline awarded with this project? Is it for right now? And if so, they were planning on moving forward with it now. Is it not in our benefit to have this information to provide to the secondary consultant that will be hired to do that? Because if we award it, what I'm understanding is that the ML group then has the ability to move forward at their time schedule.
CEO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to the Deputy Mayor. So as I mentioned, I believe when we originally went out with the RFP, the time frame was suggested that we would award in the fall or December of 2020. And based on that, we were looking to have this completed by May. Obviously, we're a month behind. And so obviously, in my mind, the timing of when this would be completed would be no earlier than June, based on the original time schedule. So in my mind, we could go to the consultant, as I mentioned earlier, and have a discussion with them, assuming we're awarding to them tonight, and just indicate that our schedule has changed, and is that going to make a change in their proposal? And if it does, then obviously we would have to come back to council to provide that information. Again, I want to clarify the efficiency audit at this stage, and I'm trying to be as respectful as I can here. I don't know what the scope of that efficiency audit is, so I don't know what the implications are going to be on this, whether there are going to be implications or whether they're not. I don't know, and until we determine the scope of that efficiency audit, I'm a little, I'm uncertain as to how to answer the question, to be honest with you, because I really don't know what the scope of, again, that audit's going to be.
Okay. So anybody need the motion read again before voting? Okay. All of those in favor of the amended motion? That is carried. And now the regular motion, Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. The main motion as amended would be moved by Councillor Cabral and seconded by Councillor Moore, and would read that the report from the Manager of Human Resources regarding award of comprehensive compensation review, RFP 2020-47 ADM, dated January 20th, 2021, be received, and that ML Consulting be awarded the contract to a maximum of $50,400 plus HST, and that the commencement of the review be postponed until after the service delivery review.
Okay, all those in favor? That is carried. Next is 7.7. I believe it was Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Allen. I believe this would be to Director Spagnell. I'm in support of the additional residential units. When we had that open house there last month or whatever, not too long ago, there was a square footage maximum of 1,238 square feet. Now I'm reading that it's only going to be 40%. Well, I can see maybe 40% working if you're living in a great big house, but us farmers, of course, we're salt of the earth, don't you know? We only live in modest homes. So if you take a modest home at 1,400 square feet, that's only 560 square feet, which is about the size of a chicken coop, and I can't live in that. So I have concerns about this 40%. It should be increased, or is there other wording there that I'm missing?
In the planner listed, the report, I'll direct it to her first, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Councillor Ritchie. The maximum amounts are the same that were proposed for the public meeting. There's been no changes to those the percentage or the floor area. You are correct. So if the additional unit is to be located within the dwelling, it needs to be to a maximum of 40% of that gross floor area of the house. Now that's if it's within the dwelling. If it's detached from the dwelling, depending on the property, the maximum would be 1,238 square feet if you're in that agricultural property. So if you have an agricultural lot, a 40 acres, 40 hectare property, depending on the structures that you have, the maximum would be 1,238 if it's detached from the house. The 40% is just if it's within the dwelling itself. And it is the same that was proposed at the public meeting. Now, if you do have concerns with that, that is something that staff could take a look at and discuss further and see if we should be amending that 40% rule.
Thank you.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I guess through to Planner Lisk. I just want clarification on this percentage within the house that Councillor Ritchie is speaking about. Would that also include someone who wanted to put an addition under their house to accommodate the second dwelling? Would that 40% still apply, or would that 1,280 then apply? If it was attached, like I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yep. Through you, Mayor Allen, to Councillor Cabral. The 40% would apply if it's considered attached to the house. So if there was an addition to the house, it still would be 40%. And just to clarify, if it is located in the basement, it can be up to 50%. And when we're talking about the percentage, it's based on the gross floor area of the house. So we're looking at all levels of the house to provide that 40% or 50% rule. So it's not just the main level. It's if the house does have, a second story, that would also be included, as well as in the basement in that calculation.
Follow on.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm right here. So I have a 1,000 square foot house, and that means I can put on a 400 square foot addition, which basically means that my dwelling itself as a whole is now 1,400 square feet. Am I correct in that analogy?
Yes, you are correct.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Ritchie.
So again, Planner Lisk, 1,500 square foot home. I want to get this straight. So I have a 1,500 square foot home. I can finish up to half of that is 750. I can finish up to 750 square feet of that as a unit. Is that correct?
Planner Lisk.
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Councillor Ritchie. If I didn't have a calculator in front of me, but as long as that was 40%, you are correct. And if it was to be located in the basement, it can be the entire basement up to 50%.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. Can I have a mover and seconder for this motion then, please? Councillor Moore and Deputy Mayor Coughlin, that the report of the planner regarding OP 220-001 and ZB 220-006 additional residential units dated January 20, 2021 be received, and that a council approve bylaw 2021-001 and adopt the official plan amendment OPA 61 as it is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan for Greater Golden Horseshoe, conforms with the County of Simcoe official plan and the Township of Springwater official plan, and that the amendment be submitted to the County of Simcoe for approval, subject to minor modifications, that the implementing zone bylaw be submitted to council for adoption, subject to the approval of the official plan amendment by the County of Simcoe. All those in favor? It is carried. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to 7.9. Let's get a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please. Councillor Cabral and Councillor Maw. Councillor Cabral, you pulled this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Allen. I was interested to read it all over, especially with the recent announcement from SWIFT. However, I'm looking at this and thinking back to the presentation earlier on, and basically, even with SWIFT, they're talking about fiber, and that's a gigabyte per second. And I don't know if you folks know how much data that is, but I watch Netflix and I'm paying for 5 megabytes per second. And a megabyte is like a nickel to $1 million almost, or $1,000. Anyhow, the problem I have isn't necessarily with us supporting or advocating as a council or a township for enhanced broadband internet services. The problem I have is that even with SWIFT, they're not going to be helping with what they've been doing with the people that are actually at the disadvantage in the rural areas, on concessions and on the back roads, in particular the farmers. And the reason for that is they're not going to run fiber optic lines between farm residences that are 2,000 feet apart. It's admirable that SWIFT is doing this because they are going to be bringing fiber optics broadband to some of the small hamlets and some of the smaller areas where there are clusters of homes. And I can see that making sense. But even with their numbers, it's over $3,000 per connection. And that's 3,000 taxpayer dollars. I'd also like to point out that Simcoe County since 2015 has provided $2.5 million. And when we look at that $2.5 million, I would like to suggest that Springwater taxpayers are already paying into that fund, and we're already supporting bringing high-speed broadband into the township. I just want to put out there that not everybody needs a Cadillac. We have people in the township that they're not even driving Chevrolets or Fords. And there are a lot of other options available to us that can get them up to 25. The government standard says 50 megabytes. I'm at 5 and I get by. Now, mind you, if I'm watching Netflix and someone else in the house wants to watch Netflix, nobody's watching Netflix. It's kind of like having a shower in your house. If 3 people want to have shower at the same time, you're out of luck with water pressure if it's only really, really good when one person has it at a time. And internet is very similar to that when it comes to broadband versus water pressure. So what I'm trying to say here with respect to this report, and I really appreciate CEO Schmidt's work on it, is that while I want to support and advocate for increased internet service within Springwater Township, I don't want and I don't believe it's a municipal responsibility to funnel funds into it. I would like to see us trying to create partnerships or work with some of the broadband, the smaller broadband internet service providers, in particular the wireless ones, because they seem to be able to reach the places that nobody else wants to go to with the fiber or with the cable. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I want to support this. I don't want to just do nothing, but I don't feel it's appropriate to put money into it. When we look here at some of the figures that we've got I think there was one here that spoke about one proponent. First off, everybody wants half of the money from township. And in some cases, that'll be millions of dollars. One proponent here, I think, and I don't have it right in front of me, I think it was $6 million to provide internet service to a little over 1,000 homes. I could be wrong on that figure, but it worked out to about 4,000 and change per connection. Once again, that's a fiber option. And all I'm saying is that I think from our standpoint, we're a lot better off to support and work towards providing those people in our township that don't have access to internet, reliable internet that's affordable. And there are companies like Ultrafast and a few others that provide the 4G, which is point-to-point wireless internet. That's what I have at the house here. And also there's the solution with satellite dishes. So the point I'm trying to make is I don't think we should be putting taxpayer funds into bringing broadband into Springwater Township when the federal and provincial government are already doing it. But as you can see, the federal and provincial government are bringing it to communities and clusters of homes where it's economically more feasible, even at over $3,000 a connection. So that's my thoughts on this. I'm happy to support one of the options, but certainly not putting money into it.
CEO Schmidt, do you have any comment before I go to any more comments from councillors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All that I would say is, I guess, to Councillor Cabral's point is that, you know, the township has been approached by at least one ISP, local ISP, requesting support, and it was just a letter of support, almost similar to what was being requested by Mr. Kirk earlier tonight. Again, no financial obligation on the township. It was just simply this ISP was looking to submit an application to provincial or federal government for funding, and we're seeking, and essentially we're asking us that we wouldn't get in the way. As in, we would support them moving forward with a project. But again, I reiterated to them, you know, I don't have authority to provide any financial commitment to you. I said that would have to come to council. But, you know, I said my council is discussing this tonight, and I said, you know, this is something they need to make a decision on. Is what position do they want to move forward with? Do they want to continue more of, as I mentioned in the report, more of the advocacy role, and again, continuing to reach out to different levels of government to obtain more funding for different projects within communities, but no financial commitment from the municipality. Whether you take on a little bit more of a support role, whereby maybe there are some funds, not all, you know, we're not going to pay for $6 or $3 million of a project, but whether you start to consider putting some money aside, whether it be, as mentioned earlier, in a CIP type of a program, to the extent that exists. I know the Caledons of the world have done that. They've built up an infrastructure reserve, or a broadband reserve similar to our infrastructure reserve. So they do put money aside. Again, that's an option, but I'm not saying that's what you have to do, but it is an option. And then, of course, the last piece that I was suggesting is you could take more of an active role and go back out to the market and, as I mentioned, go the RFP route. But again, you would be looking for, or individuals would be looking for, some fairly substantial commitment from the township, subject to not getting provincial or federal funding. You would likely be committed to some substantial funds there, unless we narrowed down the scope and said, okay, this is the specific area in Springwater that we want to focus on right now. How much is that going to cost us? That comes back and council determines whether you want to agree with it or not. The challenge with the RFP route, I find, is we don't have money set aside. So there's no budget. And so I'm not sure how, to my point earlier, I'm not sure how we go the RFP route, because someone's going to ask me what the budget is, and I'm going to say, I don't have one. So,
Deputy Mayor Coughlin, then back to Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Marilyn. And through you to CEO Schmidt, I guess first off, the comment on option number 4. First time I've seen that in all the years that we've been reading your reports. But I think that finding a way to have an active role with no financial commitment at that time. So my question then would become, it says to request for a proposal, and then I'm curious, how is that, would it not be more beneficial to us to have a request for intent, like an ROI go out, because we don't know what the financial component to it could be. I completely agree that it's not a municipal responsibility to provide internet, but it is something that we hear, and through this pandemic has been loud. We have, like you suggested, in Caledon and other communities that provide internet, but also our neighbor to the north in Ramera have just done something incredibly innovative, in my opinion, and they took the lead. They took an active lead, and I think that our residents are tired of trying to find individual approaches, trying to individually find what point to point or which cable coming into their home is going to work, and they're looking for, much like our Midhurst group has done, a more consolidated approach, and they're asking us to help them lead them through that. And that's the active role that I'm looking to take, is that I'm hoping that our council can come together and find a way to actively support our residents to find ways to attract new businesses. Like you said, when we have our business, our industrial lands, when they speak to having a service lot, internet is now a service that is required by our home-based businesses, by our industrial businesses or commercial businesses. It's something that our residents need. And yes, we are very diverse, and we do have a lot of rural roots that are going to be more of a challenge to bring internet to. But we also have many hamlets that it may not be as much of a challenge to actively work with the SWIFT initiative to extend the fiber out, to make them aware of other communities that exist or that are growing. So I think that taking an active approach in this, it is the route to go. I am concerned that option number 3 does suggest a request for proposal, because as we experienced with our integrity commissioner and earlier tonight, that tends to bind our council. So it would be more of a request for intent that I'd be willing to support.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think I understand the Deputy Mayor's comments here, and really, I think for the expression of interest that we went out with, that was kind of the idea, is at least get out there and see who the players are that might want to play nice with the township, if you will. But the challenge is right now is through those submissions. Again, there's no commitment from either side. The challenge is we didn't necessarily identify any specific areas that we were really trying to narrow in on. So I think if we were to go down that route, we would have to kind of identify some specific areas that we're trying to key in on, and then we might be able to get some more meatier, if you will, for lack of a better term, more comprehensive submissions back to the township that we might be able to analyze and then bring the council for their consideration. But to your point, in whatever that document is, whatever we want to call it, we would have to be very specific, and maybe reaching out to Ramera to see what their terms were, to kind of just make sure that there is no commitment from the onset, and that would still have to be determined through whatever they provide back to the township, and it would have to go through council for final approval. I will state that we have had a few individuals. I wouldn't say I probably had a dozen, maybe, if that, have reached out to the township, either through various members of council and or directly to myself, seeking, how come I don't have broadband? How come I don't have internet? And what we've tried to do is now that we have a little bit more knowledge about the mapping that's out there, which is a struggle that I find. I think one of the difficulties with this is just actually trying to find out where connections are. And some of the ISPs or some of the Bells and the Rogers of the world aren't forthcoming with that information. For whatever reason, they're not. And so, to be honest with you, I'd love to be on fiber, and that's my choice, but I don't know where the nearest connection is here. But we try to work with some of these residents, and with that map, we try to identify with them to say, listen, you know what? For example, there was a couple of individuals on Henry Road that were interested. And I said, well, from my understanding, and stand to be corrected, is on Binney Road, there appeared to be some fibe available. And I said, you might want to reach out to Bell, because they were the providers in the area, to see whether or not there's an opportunity to run fiber. And what I would suggest is seek your neighbor's support as well. And if you have enough people that are interested in the area, maybe Bell or the Rogers or whoever's providing the service in the area might be willing to work with them. And to the extent that the township can help, not necessarily financially, but can help to support in any way that we can, we'll try to do that. But beyond that, I think I think to Councillor Cabral's point is it a service that is it a service that the municipality wants to get into? I guess is ultimately the decision.
Follow on, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you. And I guess that would, just as a follow on that, as staff and as members of council, we all hear from residents, the suggestion for the broadband at springwater.ca as a CC on communication so that we can compile it. And I fully understand the idea that we don't want to provide a false sense that we have a complete department allocated to that, but at least allow the consensus so that we have a compiled and concise concerns from our residents, so that there's one spot that staff and members of council can go to, so that if we hear from a resident, it all goes to the same spot. I think it would be beneficial for us moving forward as well.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I did find the stat there, and we're really kind of saying the same thing here, for lack of a better term. It's just that I don't feel everybody needs to drive the Cadillac. That's what it boils down to. And I know that the Cadillac's not coming to the rural doorways. It's like natural gas. They'll run it to Elmvale, and if they ran it in front of my house, they'd let me tap into it. But they're not going to run it over to the 11th, and they're not going to run it down to the 9th. And that's the same with fiber optics or any other cable type network. But the one proponent, they said it would cost $6.7 million to connect 1,061 homes. This is from the report, and that translates into about $6,300 per connection. So, and at that rate of the game, that $6.7 million, township would be expected to fork out anywhere from 50 to 75%, according to the report. So what I'm suggesting is that we do take, number one, a strong advocacy role. Let's apply for whatever grants we can. Let's find out what services are actually available out there, because I would hazard a guess that many of us maybe don't know what's available. There's satellite dish that is available, but it has its constraints with trees and whatnot. I'm on a repeater system like Ultrafast. The tower I connect to, and this is a small company out of Sable Beach, they're not even local. They didn't get any federal money or provincial money to come out here and provide internet service to the residents of Springwater Township. They've done it on their own, mostly by word of mouth. The fiber optic connection is in Wasaga Beach. I have a little antenna on my, and what they've done is they've gone out to various farmers. There's a tower out there in Minising on one of the farmers' big grain bins. The Langmans had a grain bin down here at 29 and Crosland Road. That's where I was originally connected to with a little dish on my house. And now I'm connected to my next door neighbor. They have a repeater station on top of their silo. And you can get faster speeds. But of course, the more you eat, the more you got to pay. But all I'm saying is that there's a number of people in our township that don't even have what I have, let alone fiber optics. So I'm just saying, let's have the strong advocacy role. Let's look for the grants. Let's connect people with some of these providers, because Max ISP might very well be able to go over to maybe around the 3rd, where they live in behind the trees there, pop up a little tower on a fairly economical scale, enough to put a repeater at the top, and then capture some of those. And that's the same thing that Ultrafast does out of Barrie. If I'm not mistaken, we have an antenna at Yard 2 that Ultrafast uses. So I'm all for number one, and I'm all for getting together. I would love to sit on a committee that maybe wanted to look at how we could bring people and suppliers together. But I don't think just because, and I'll tell you something else, it'd be a real shame if the provincial, if the municipalities start taking on the burden of providing internet service. I can tell you what the federal and provincial governments are going to do. They're going to say, go at her, boys, because you're saving us coin. So I really like number one, advocacy role. Once again, I just wanted to point out it's a very expensive option for our municipality to get into if we're going to actually put money into it. And we just had a meeting for the long-term financial plan, which didn't make me feel very good. And we have a lot of other issues to deal with that take money. So advocacy role, all for it. And I'd love to see us be able to bring the internet service providers, in particular, some of the small ones, that this is a niche market for them. They're not getting any federal or provincial money, yet they're still providing the service. Bell Canada, I bet you half of the money they make, it's taxpayers that gave it to them.
CEO Schmidt, the report, you filtered out in the report the people that provide fiber. And of course, you said fiber is more future oriented than using towers or using Wi-Fi. But to Councillor Cabral's point, maybe that's just too much that we could not afford at this point in time. What would happen if we went out for requests for proposals, but use that first list that you had that could involve response that would involve fiber, but also not fiber solutions? What do you think the reception would be to do to that? I mean, advocacy is fine, but you can't get any grants if you're just in an advocacy role. You've got to, as we've seen through the two that you cited, we have to be in some sort of partnership with a credible party that has experience. So if we went out for an RFP and just basically said what we were trying to find out is give us solutions, possible solutions and possible costs. So that's not committing us financially, but it's at least advancing this exercise to see whether there's any potential for some sort of a community broadband project here to take into, to come up with the shortfalls that are not going to be satisfied with the SWIFT project.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff can proceed in any direction that council gives us. My challenge with an RFP, as I indicated, is that typically when you issue an RFP, you're committing the organization to go ahead with a project. And again, the question will arise, how much money have you set aside to commit towards this? And my answer is going to be, I don't have any money. So, it's going to be a little difficult to issue an RFP under those terms. Some of these individuals, they do provide for other solutions, as Councillor Cabral mentioned. And yes, it would be staff's recommendation to, if we're going to invest any money, any township money, it would be for a solution that would be, future proof and would, is likely going to last, the next 10 to 20 years. I will state that, we've had discussions with a little bit going on a tangent here, but we've had discussions with the developers in Midhurst, and I know this came up in the conversation earlier tonight with Mr. Kirk, but we have had conversations with them, and my position with them has been, you need to have fiber in those developments. So when someone comes to purchase a new home in Midhurst, I want to make sure that they have fiber, because I don't want to get a complaint in 3 years down the road that they just bought a new house and they don't have, fiber. So to me, I've tried to pressure them, and they've come back and stated that they've had conversations with Bell and Rogers, and both are committed to provide fiber. And that would be for the same thing on the other side of Midhurst and any other developments that we're trying to move forward with, is that we need to push these individuals or these developers to bring that type of servicing to the township, and then maybe from there may be connection points that we can connect to in the future. But again, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but just want the council to be aware that we are trying to put those things in place. And we've had some discussions even with, and I have a call next week or in the next couple of days with the county about, infrastructure and building infrastructure and access to conduit, not necessarily putting fiber in it right away, but at least putting conduit down when we're replacing some of these major roads, so that there is an opportunity for potentially partnering with some of these providers and possibly making a couple of bucks off them to utilize our conduit, if you will. So those are some of the other things that we are considering. But again, the RFP route, if we don't have money set aside, I'm going to have a hard time. Trying to answer some of those questions about how much money we've set aside for specific projects.
Okay, Councillor Hannah, thank you. And then Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of good discussions. I can't support any financial commitment. We're not in the internet business. However, I absolutely support trying to do whatever can be done to get good broadband service, internet service throughout the whole township. As was mentioned by Councillor Gabel, he's more into it than I am, but because he gets internet and he gets it wirelessly, I believe. I've heard from some people who also get it in Ward 5. They're more in the rural area. They get it, but they don't want to pay the extra to get increased service. Unfortunately, that's how it works. We're in the business of supplying water, municipal water, but not everybody has municipal water. Are we going to go into and start raising money and provide municipal water to all the houses that don't have it? We're in that business, but we're not in the internet business. And to do an RFP and commit us to financial, absolutely not. Again, we got to support this. We can advocate for it, do whatever we have to do, but we can't make this a burden for the taxpayers in Springwater Township. I would support doing whatever we can to try to get this and move it forward, but not a financial commitment.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm glad to see CAO Schmidt raised a very good point about, going to the developers and asking them. That's very worthy and for Midhurst and that new development that we see coming forward in Hillsdale. Again, asking the developers for that as well too. Have we reached out to Rogers and Bell and see what their views are on it? Like, I have a hard time spending money and then they reap all the rewards. It's like we got enough things to pay for without paying for Rogers and Bell. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I'm a great advocate for it, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, then Councillor Cabral.
All right, thank you. So then moving forward in that direction, then with more of an advocate role, providing a starting point for residents to come together. So it was news to me that there's conduit on Binney because it's an older, I guess, new development. But the mapping that was provided to the county by SWIFT, is there an opportunity for us to even provide that to our residents so that people know what is on their street, what is potentially there, so that they can come together to request things from different providers that might already be available? I do know that it is not our responsibility, but it is becoming like phone and gas and water. It's becoming a necessity to residents. So if we're going to take an advocacy role, I would like to understand better what that looks like to this council, and if it's simply mapping and communication, I think that would be a good start then.
Certainly the SWIFT site has the map on it that you can drill down to.
No, sorry, my apologize for interrupting, Mayor Allen, out of order there, but no, it's not as to, I understand where the SWIFT is coming to. My concern is what's already in the ground, what's already available to the residents. Also, we have a group in Pinecrest or Pine, I don't know what the name of it was, but the mapping for Swift stops just before them, and who do they talk to about bringing it forward and bringing it that little bit more in. So I don't know if we in Springwater are able to figure out through which developments have gone through and what conduit went down when the development happened, to know what's already in the ground, to know what's available to the residents, because all these one-offs happening everywhere. We saw that it took a community coming together to make something happen. So I just wanted to know how we could assist in that.
I think you'll find it's as CEO Schmidt alluded to, and other discussions I've had with people, it's very hard to get that information from Bell or Rogers. They're very tightly kept, and without knocking on doors and saying, trying to get information from residents who provides you the service, and that it's very difficult to get that information. But CEO Schmidt, do you have anything to add on Deputy Mayor's comments?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, if that's the role, if members of council are supportive of going the advocacy route, and part of that includes putting something on our website that should a member of the public be interested in trying to determine who the providers are, and we could list the ones that we know of, and we'd have to be cautious how we do this, but we could also put links to the Swift site. We could put links to the I'm trying to remember the name. It's ISED, and I can't remember what it stands for. Innovation, Science, and something else, development. That's kind of the other map that's out there that you use for when you're applying for some of these applications or these funding applications. So that's available, and again, we could put a link to that, and that does provide some of the information that the deputy mayors stated, where you have to dig in and you have to kind of understand the map a little bit. There's some complexity to it and time. So, individuals could take a look at that and see where, the 50-10, the 25-10, or the 5-10, or the 5-1 connections are, and so they can kind of see that. So again, that could be an added feature on our website, so that when someone is potentially looking to move to Springwater, if they want to do some more due diligence, they could potentially look at that and make sure that when before they sign on the dotted line, they know what to kind of expect from an internet perspective. So I'm willing to direct staff to do that if council's supportive of that. We would have to be very careful that the township is not in a position to provide financial support for this, but here's some information, and if you have any questions, we would ask that you direct them to the applicable parties, and go from there.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just a few more comments, really. When it comes to what's available in Springwater Township, if anybody's got cable TV and they want to get internet, that used to be the highest standard at about 200 to 250 megabits per second. Now, if you take that into consideration and you think that fiber optics is, to be quite honest with you, a fairly recent phenomenon, and they're retrofitting all the major cities, and certainly with the Midhurst secondary plan, I could tell you that Bell and Rogers, Cogeco, all of those internet service providers and connectivity companies are falling over themselves trying to get in there when that comes online, because they're going to make a pile of money. What we're forgetting about is the real reason about internet isn't to get the highest speed, but to provide our residents with an adequate internet connection. And I think part of that would be, the problem is that we have certain areas that we don't know where they're at. So having said that, CEO Schmidt said, when it comes to the RFP, I don't know if that's the right way to go. I think we can reach out to the internet service providers right now that we have, invite them to a meeting, sit down and say, here's some of our underserviced areas. Is there anything that you can propose to do that might be able to help it? I can tell you right now that Bell and Rogers probably won't be interested, but the wireless and the satellite dish people might be. And I think that's what we need to do, is look at places where, forget about getting a gigabyte, which if you want to know what that is, that's 1,000 megabits per second. Keep in mind, I'm on 5 and I watch Netflix. is to identify those locations. Over on the baseline, we have some people that, they really don't have much of an option. Forget about internet. They have trouble with their cellular connections. But the opportunity for a wireless company with these point-to-points, they could effectively probably put a little tower over there. And if those folks got together, what I see us doing is being kind of a conduit to bring these groups together. And I think we could do that. If we were to connect with some of the ISPs and get them to come to a little meeting, and they did have some proposals, I think then Township would, as an advocacy role, assist with them in seeking and acquiring some grant money. Just like we could do that with Mr. Kirk, if he was looking for grant money and we were on board with a particular proposal that he was going to do, and not putting our money into it, but partnering with that particular project, sure, we could lend our support to applying for the grant, I would think, at the same time. So I really do feel that we can play a big role in advocacy, and we can do a lot more without spending money.
Councillor Cabral, why don't you draft some words with respect to a motion, with respect to assuming an advocacy role, and suggest this committee that I believe you volunteered to be on, possibly to chair, and
I could
do this further research.
I could certainly do that, Mayor Allen, but I would suggest to you that the next steps in the report, number one, that speaks to the advocacy role, pretty much does that. I'm happy to still sit on the committee with CAO Schmidt and anybody else who might be so inclined.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you. I guess my suggestion here would be, I'm curious, Council would have an appetite then to defer what's in front of us today and have Councillor Cabral and myself, and if there's another member of Council who would like to be involved in the conversation, report back with an actual what the next step would be for a municipality, because without direction, with no funding, I think that we all are in agreement to that, hearing the conversation, but then to provide, because if it's just to take an advocacy role, that doesn't outline any steps, it might as well be option 4. So if Councillor Cabral is willing to sit down with CO Schmidt and myself, and we can come up with an actual plan for how we can assist our residents and our various demands, because even if we do have 2 families that live on a rural route, what their individual needs are going to be very different. So it's not about necessarily urban versus rural. It's trying to find the best fit for Springwater. So if I could please then put that on the table, I would be happy to do so.
Okay, let's have a motion then, please, to that effect.
Are you drafting one up?
Yes, Clerk
Okay.
Ainsworth is starting to, and she will be speaking to us. While she's doing that, I'm going to pause just for a second.
Just for everyone on council, just to show you the discrepancy that you can have even with the wireless point-to-point. I'm kind of a loyal customer to Max ISP because they were the first ones that came along here and provided it, so I've kind of stuck with them. But my neighbors are actually with a different firm, and they point to a different tower. They're right across the road from me, but their internet speed that they're provided for right now is 25 megabits per second. It's a little bit more money than what I pay, but it's 5 times the speed. So there are options out there, but all of them have their limitations. I just really think that if we could connect certain people with some of the options, I think we could really kind of move the ball along without Township having to commit funds to it. So I'm looking forward to working with the deputy and with CAO Schmidt. CO Schmidt, can I ask you a quick question? On the, there's a lot of companies out there that piggyback on other players' infrastructure. Adnac Internet is one of them in Toronto. They don't have any of their own infrastructures. They rent basically bandwidth wholesale from either Bell or Rogers, and then they resell it. Out of all of the proponents that replied to you, were any of those, did any of those fit in that category? Because they wouldn't be the ones who would put it in. I just don't know. I was wondering if you might know if there were the odd one that put in for it that really doesn't have their own infrastructure.
Through you, Councillor Cabral, I'd have to double check. It's been a little bit before I read since I've read them all, but I'm thinking back now based on what some of the submissions were. I think you're right. Is some of them were using, I think that's obviously what Mr. Kirk's doing, right? Is he's lying on the backs of the Rogers and the Bells to be able to connect.
Yeah, he'll be buying bulk bandwidth from them.
Yeah. So I think some of the other players that submitted were of the same kind of structure, utilizing other infrastructure. And to be honest with you, I've had conversations with Hydro One myself, and there's a huge hydro corridor that runs right through the middle of the township, essentially from south to north or north to south. And we've had discussions, preliminary discussions with them, and something we might want to explore even more with this group or with this committee is furthering those discussions. My understanding is that they're looking at running fiber from their, I'm going to get this wrong, but I believe it's their kind of ESSA station up to Aurelia. And so I've said, well, if you're running fiber, then why wouldn't you allow others to potentially be able to tap into it along the way? And in addition to that, there's been some suggestions. I was partaking in a webinar whereby this one was new to me, where they run fiber along railway lines in certain areas of the province. And so, if there's fiber running along a railway line, which funny enough is not too far away from the office and runs through the township, there might be an opportunity there as well to see what's available. So there are options, as you mentioned, right? So. Yeah.
Okay, Clerk Ainsworth, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is the draft wording, so please provide any input that would need to be made to change it to the direction of council. That the motion now before council be referred to staff to work with members of council to provide further options regarding an active advocacy role.
Okay.
Is it okay? Mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Ma and Councillor Cabral, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right.
Sorry, was that the main motion?
Do we have to go read the main motion, or is that sufficient, Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Because it was a referral, it would now become the main motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I believe we're moving on to 8.1 information reports. Mover and seconder to get these on the floor, please. Councillor Moore and Councillor Ma. There are 5 items. Any questions with respect to any of these items? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Not a question. I just wanted to say thank you to Director Ippolito for providing the report for the interim building inspector. And I thought it was really informative, and I look forward to the building department moving forward, hopefully with one of those positions. I just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you. Okay, the motion is that the report items listed herein be received as information. Drinking water systems inspection report for Midhurst and for Vespra Downs, the bylaw activity report November 2020, the upgrade fire department pagers, and the intern building inspector. All those in favor? That is carried. Verbal reports. Director Spagnell, official plan update, economic development update, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'd just like to inform council that staff will be preparing and sending out invites or invitations to interested stakeholders, residents regarding stakeholder meetings about the draft reports that were discussed at council in December. Those reports, if you'll recall, were related to the corridor study for Bayfield Street, the population serving commercial report, along with the intensification report. The purpose of the stakeholder meetings is to provide an overview of those reports and to obtain comments from interested stakeholders and residents. Council will receive the same invites and the same letters, and those invitations will also be sent to the advisory committees. Council is more than welcome to sit in on these stakeholder meetings if they choose to, just to observe the comments that come in, and the date will be solidified in the future. We're just preparing those invitations now and getting that process set up. One initiative from an economic development perspective that staff have been involved in is the Digital Main Street and Beyond and Shop Here program. The purpose of that program is to work with the Small Business Enterprise Center to connect small businesses with the program to enhance their internet presence, to provide for online shopping. So it appears that internet and the online presence is something that is somewhat of a theme tonight. So staff has been working with the Small Business Enterprise Center to connect small businesses in Springwater with that program. Staff has also informed the BIA of this program, and these services are free and expire on February 9th. That concludes my my overview.
Any questions regarding Director Spagnell's reports? Okay, moving on to the COVID, I lost my place here. Midhurst Developments update or COVID reports, CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as most members of council should be aware, there was an information bulletin shared with all of you, I believe it was last week, maybe early this week, regarding kind of the status of what's happening in the Midhurst development. So as you're aware, on December 21st, council at a special council meeting did approve the stage 2 subdivision agreement for phase 1 of this development, phase 1A of this development, sorry, which essentially permits internal servicing to commence. So this will include the installation of services such as water mains and sanitary sewers and storm sewers and such. In addition to the internal site servicing, the council also approved the tree clearing to commence on the utility lands or the treatment lands where the water and wastewater treatment plants will go, which is located on the north side of Snow Valley Road. So I believe staff are just working with the developers right now on executing that tree clearing and making sure that proper documentation is in place. In addition to that, the contractor, who is, I believe, Condrain, has commenced mobilization of their equipment onto the phase 1 lands and are also in the process of bringing on their materials, so their infrastructure, their pipes, if you will. So that has been happening, and I believe will continue to happen over the next little bit. And my understanding is the route that they're using is coming up along Wilson, north on Wilson, and then a right on Carson, and then accessing their construction entrance just before the Ann Street North unopened road allowance. Further to that, their building services has issued a permit for the sales center, and so work has started to commence on the sales center, and that will be located at the northwest corner of Carson and Ann Street. So those are kind of the updates as it relates to Midhurst development. I'll pause there, Mr. Mayor, if there's any questions.
Any questions, council?
No.
COVID update then, CEO Schmidt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So have a little bit of information here to share, and some of it will probably be old news, but just in case. So as everyone's aware, on January 12th, the province of Ontario declared a state of emergency under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. And further to this, on January 14th at 12:01 a.m., a stay-at-home order came into effect requiring that everyone in Ontario to remain at home, with some exceptions, and those being for essential purposes such as trips to the grocery store or pharmacy, accessing healthcare, for exercise or essential work. This order and other and new existing public health restrictions are aimed at limiting people's mobility and reducing the number of daily contacts with those outside an immediate household. In addition to limiting outings for essential purposes, all businesses must ensure that any employees who can work from home do work from home, hence why you're seeing me and Shay Schmidt tonight. Now I'm at home. So further to this, with these following measures, the Springwater has put in place the following. So capacity limits for outdoor organized public events and gatherings are further restricted from 10 to 5 people. Individuals are required to wear a mask or face covering in indoor areas of a business or organization that are able to remain open. And further to that, wearing a mask or face covering is also recommended now for outdoors when you cannot properly physically distance from others. Some have gone even further to say you should be wearing them regardless of whether you can physically distance in an outdoor setting. Furthermore, all non-essential retail stores offering curbside pickup or delivery must open no earlier than 7 a.m. and close no later than 8 p.m. Restricted hours of operations do not apply for pharmacies or to pharmacies, gas stations, convenience stores, or stores that sell primarily food, including restaurants offering takeout or delivery. As it relates to more specifically the township services, so all township facilities are closed to the public, including the Township Administration Center, fire halls, work yards, Elmville Arena, and community halls. Right now, we're not permitting any appointments at the Township Administration Center until further notice. Most Administration Center employees are working remotely, with a limited number of staff being permitted to be in the Township Administration Center on a daily basis. So again, we are trying to do our part to ensure that we have as minimal amount of people, if you will, in that facility. All staff have been given resources, whether it be laptops and or other resources that our IT department has been able to deploy to ensure that everybody's working remotely and is being productive. So staff are available. We are working remotely, but we are available via phone and email. Our Public Works and Recreation, Parks and Facilities staff are continuing to work their regularly scheduled shifts. They have further restrictions in place to make sure that they're safe. Our Building Services staff are working on a rotating shift or a schedule. So like a team A and a team B every other day. We have staff that are able to provide service for building services. And our bylaw enforcement staff are scheduled to ensure that we have a 7-day coverage as it relates to that service. Furthermore, the township's public libraries, they do continue to operate under the same format as before, so providing curbside pickup, so they are still providing for that. Council meetings obviously are still continuing to be conducted in a virtual setting until further notice. Our Committee of Adjustment meetings will be moving to a virtual environment, so staff are currently working with that committee with the intent of having the next meeting, which I believe is the 27th, I think, of this month. They're looking at having that in a virtual setting, and I think that's going fairly well. Furthermore, outdoor rinks have been temporarily closed until further notice, and obviously members of council have been updated on that situation, and we have provided a media release that's published in the Springwater News, also on our website and on various social media platforms advising of these closures, and furthermore informing residents of the reasons why these rinks have been temporarily closed. And I believe there was a question earlier tonight regarding the Elmville Arena. So we have made a decision to remove the ice in the Elmville Arena. on the notion that we don't know how long this lockdown is going to be in place for. We know it's a minimum of 28 days. However, the amount of money that we're having to invest to try to keep that ice maintained over 30 days minimum is not cheap. So we're looking at around a $10,000 to $12,000 cost, and so we felt that that wouldn't be prudent, and hence we made the decision to remove the ice. And we had no firm commitments from the Elmville Minor Hockey Association and or other user groups to utilize the ice. So we did make that decision. And furthermore, so to date, Springwater, these numbers may be a day behind. These were as of yesterday, so they may have changed, hopefully not. But so Springwater has had, as of yesterday, 142 confirmed. So 142 confirmed cases of COVID, of which 89 have now recovered and 1 has passed. Just a little bit further information. So since January 1st of this year, we have seen, so Springwater has seen 32 new cases of COVID. And to put things into a little bit more perspective, when I took a look at from March 13th to November of last year, Springwater had 40 confirmed cases at that time. So since that time, since November, we have recorded more than 100 cases in Springwater alone. And so in essentially the last 2 months, we've increased by over 100 cases. So I guess what I'm saying is Springwater is not immune to this, and anyone out there who's not taking this seriously really needs to think otherwise. I'll leave it at that. And I think the other last point that I want to say is I know there was some discussion earlier today, and most of you probably know now, that the schools, there was a decision on schools, and it's my understanding that there's only seven public health units in Southern Ontario that are allowing students to go back to school on Monday, and Simcoe Muskoka is not one of them. So our students will not be returning to school in-person learning on Monday. And I think, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my update for this evening, and be happy to answer any questions that members of council may have.
Thank you. Council, any comments, questions?
Just that they didn't include a date either. So there were one of the 15 that are health boards that are not going back on Monday, and there's no date as to when our kids might actually go back. So it's not looking good.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Coughlin, county updates.
Thank you, Marilyn. And through you, at this point, our last meeting was human services, heavy on human services. It was our MAID contract for the 4 long-term care facilities. And also at that point, there was no, I'm going to say beefy or controversial on that agenda. We do have our service delivery group, as you recall from the regional governance review, we split into 2, one being governance and one being service delivery. So the service delivery group meets again tomorrow, and that I'll have an update at that point as to which we're moving forward with, and if we have any of our information come back from any of the third-party reviews that we had done. So.
Okay, municipal updates. Any municipal updates? All right, moving on to item 10.1, we have notices of motion, and Councillor Moore has a notice of motion. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. As council is aware, we made an agreement.
1 second, Councillor Moore. Clerk Ainsworth, I believe she's probably going to ask for a seconder in your motion. Is that the question?
Oh, sorry.
People have read Councillor Moore's motion. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ritchie. Go ahead, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. As council is aware, there was an agreement made for the use of the municipal lands and the mixed subdivision. And in that agreement, the price tag attached was $350,000. What I'd like to see is that money being used in Ward 4. The development is in Ward 4, and it is an inconvenience, of course, to all the residents that live here. And a need in our ward is to upgrade the Grenfell Hall, or make a decision as to its future and make the upgrades that are appropriate. So what I'm looking for is approval to earmark this money for that project. But I would like to also make an amendment. I did have a conversation with CAO through the clerk, and $350,000 is a lot of money, and I may not need all of that money for the project that I have in mind. And so the motion says the remaining funds to be set aside for council approved projects within Ward 4. But I could make an amendment to say that the funds be set aside for council approved projects, not necessarily in Ward 4. I think that the subdivision will affect the entire township. So if we have money left over, that's what I'd like to see done.
Just for clarification, money left over then from what specifically, Councillor Moore?
So there is a study that will be done relatively soon. So the halls will be all reviewed from what I understand, and maybe the CAO can speak to that better, to what that will entail. But I think the Grenfell Hall has probably outlived its existence. And so I'm proposing a new rink house, something similar to what Phelpston has to replace the hall.
Okay, CAO Schmidt, comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to members of council. So correct to Councillor Moore's comments. So you may recall last year we were planning on doing an RFP and going out and assessing all of our facilities. Unfortunately, that didn't happen in 2020. Staff we're right in the process of finalizing the RFP and hopefully releasing that in the next couple of days here, with the intent, as Councillor Moore said, going out and having someone assess our community halls and actually not just our community halls, all of our facilities, to determine the condition of them and not just for the purpose of this exercise. It's more to obviously help us with asset management. As you know, we need to have an asset management plan for the township completed by, well, for core infrastructure this July, but for all other infrastructure by July of 2023, I believe it is. And so facilities falls into that other category. And so we're trying to get ahead of this. And you would have seen on earlier tonight, funding for FCM, requesting additional funding for this project as well, in case we need additional money to complete the full project. So the intent is to do the assessment, understand the conditions of each of these facilities, come back to council and make a decision on depending on the recommendations coming from that report, have council make a decision on what to do with these facilities.
So for clarification, Councillor Moore, are you saying then, as a result of that review of the Grenfell Community Hall and what's required to possibly deal with the recommendations arising from that, subject to council approval of that amount, the remaining amount would be available for use in the township?
Council approved projects, but I also would like to add that the Grenfell Hall assessment be done first, so that we could expedite some changes if recommended.
Okay. Questions, comments, council? Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn, and through you maybe to Councillor Moore. So the wording then would not be anything specific to ward. It would just be that we put with the facility assessment, Grenfell be done first so that we can deal with that issue, because it is of the community halls, it is looming and it has been on our capital plan for quite some time and it has a large earmark there. So it's expediting the Grenfell Hall assessment and that there be a minimum of 350,000 set aside, because isn't there 100 already?
There is, but I understand through the CAO, and he could maybe speak to this, that 100,000 is for a different part of Ward 4. Is that correct, CAO Schmidt? And that the 350,000, from what I understand, is in excess of what we would need to do the project.
And if I can just piggyback on Councillor Moore's comment to CAO Schmidt, and then I saw years ago there was like $1 million set aside for the Grenfell Hall. So this is separate from that initiative as well, just so I'm clear, because it says Grenfell Park, not Grenfell Hall. So I'm assuming that this is a separate initiative, or how does that work?
CEO Schmidt, maybe you could clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll do my best here. So you may recall through the Stone Manor Woods subdivision, there was an agreement with the developers. And again, Director Spagnuolo, if he's on the call, can assist me here. I believe due to some infrastructure that had to be relocated as part of that subdivision, there was an agreement made whereby $100,000 or $200,000 was to be provided as a voluntary capital contribution. And again, you got to remember this was before the changes to the DC Act. So just to make sure we have everything in context here. So my understanding was there was $200,000 provided to the township. So each building permit had to pay a certain portion towards this voluntary capital contribution. We received $200,000, of which $100,000 was to be spent in the Stone Manor Woods subdivision, which I believe we've allocated to either the first neighborhood park and or the one that's going to be constructed this year into next year. And then my understanding was that the other 100,000 was supposed to be dedicated to the Grenfell, but upon further review and discussion with Director Spagnuolo and the agreement, it's my understanding actually that $100,000 is to be spent in the Grenfell, in the Center Vespra settlement area, which I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Grenfell, I don't believe is within that Center Vespra settlement area. So that's my understanding. And again, Director Spagnuolo can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Mr. Spagnuolo.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. And CEO Schmidt's correct. When you take a look at the voluntary contribution agreement, it identifies Center Vespra Community Plan area. And what that means is the settlement area boundary for Center Vespra. There are additional things that could be done whereby if through the voluntary assistance program or the agreement where if the developer agrees to it, some of those funds could be directed outside of that settlement area. But to my knowledge, that discussion has not occurred. CEO Schmidt's correct also in that there was a relocation of infrastructure. And just to provide some context, the Stone Manor Woods Corporation had applied to do a red line revision and relocate their water tower from what is now considered to be phase 4 of the development to the location where the water tower voluntary contribution was a result of negotiations with council as a result of that red line revision to move that infrastructure.
So further to that, and I believe the Deputy Mayor had mentioned that there is $1 million that's kind of being earmarked in the 10-year capital plan, probably for a couple of years now, for the upgrade, if you will, of the Grenfell Community Hall. And it's my understanding that the reason why that placeholder is there is that was part of the updated recreation parks master plan. That was one of the recommendations. And so, that's where that's coming from. I don't believe we've had a fulsome discussion with council about that. It's kind of just been a placeholder. And I think the idea is that through this assessment study, we need to determine what the status of that facility is as well as others. And like I said, come back to council, and each one of those facilities will likely need to have a conversation, and the outcome will obviously be different for each one of them. But that's the intent of this facility assessment study, is to get a better understanding of each of the conditions of each of our facilities, and then have a much more meaningful discussion with council, understanding what is being provided through that study. So hopefully that answers the questions, and if not, I'm happy to try to provide more clarity.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. And this is actually back through to Councillor Moore. My understanding here is the motion is to put a new facility there for the kids to use the washroom, change their skates, place to put the Zamboni, get rid of that old structure that's there, and build something else much in the same fashion. And then part 2 is to put any of the remaining funds, because it's unlikely that's going to cost $350,000, into a separate fund to be set aside for council approved projects. And then we're taking out the within Ward 4 part on that second part. Is that correct?
Clerk Ainsworth and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Councillor Cabral. Actually, the way the motion is worded, it wouldn't provide for any specific project at this time or specific allocation. It would just set the funds aside until the assessment of the Grenfell Hall would be completed. And then it would have to be determined from council what the next steps would be. So this motion only sets aside the funds until the assessment is completed.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Councillor Moore, that's your understanding?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. As long as that, I just want to make sure that it says what it does, plus that the Grenfell Hall review will be expedited to be completed first.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Maybe you could, do you have a revised wording, Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just on the last comments from Councillor Moore, there is no wording in the motion regarding expediting the Grenfell Hall assessment. You would like that added in?
Yes, please.
Councillor Ma, did you have your card up?
I did, but my question was answered. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you. And on the facilities review, are we then going to be waiting for the entire review to be finished, or is it possible once Grenfell has been assessed, can the conversation amongst council start then? Because as we've seen, we're already halfway through our term, and if there's going to be an opportunity to have a plan put in place for Grenfell prior to the end of this term, I think starting sooner rather than later would be my first point. And then my second point was, I'm just curious as to the necessity, and I'm fine to support the motion, but I'm curious as to the necessity for the motion if it's just common practice to have, like, if the money is earmarked for that area anyway, why do we need a motion moving forward?
Sorry if I could answer, Mayor Allen.
Councillor Moore?
It's not my understanding that the money is set aside for my ward. So that's why the motion, I wanted the motion brought forward so that that money was set aside specifically for this project in Ward 4. That's why.
Okay. CEO Schmidt?
Just thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to you, members of council. Just to follow on to Councilor Moore's comment, the subdivision agreement does not provide for any allocation of that 350. So I think what Councilor Moore is suggesting tonight is that she would want that 350 allocated as proposed in her motion tonight. So that's not potentially scooped up for something else.
although the adjustment, my understanding is it's not the 350 that's allocated. Well, we've changed the allocation of the 350 for an amount to be determined based on that study for the Grenfell Hall, and the remainder to be unallocated, pretty much, subject to council's decision about how and where it gets spent.
Yeah, if I understand it, Mr. Mayor, is that, you know, the 350 essentially would be right now allocated to that project. And once we determine what that value of that project is, then whatever the remaining balance would be, council could allocate wherever they wish in the township. But I think what Councilor Moore is wanting is to make sure that the initial portion of the 350 is allocated towards this project before any other project is awarded.
Okay. Clerk Ainsworth, do you have proposed wording? Are you throwing it up on the screen, or are you just reading it?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. It would be easier if I read the motion.
Go ahead, please.
I haven't made too many changes to it, but be it resolved that the funds included in the mixed subdivision agreement for the use of municipal lands in the amount of $350,000 be set aside for works/projects to be completed at the Grenfell Community Park, to be determined once an assessment of the Grenfell Hall is completed, and that the assessment of the Grenfell Hall be expedited, and further that any remaining funds be set aside for council approved projects.
Yep.
My only question there is that you make reference to Grenfell Community Park and then Grenfell Hall. Which are we talking about here?
It's the hall.
So let's
Not the
just refer to the hall then, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that okay with the seconder? Okay.
Councillor Ritchie, I believe, was the seconder.
Any further comments before we go to vote on this then? All those in favor? That is carried.
Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you. Any further notices of motion? Item 11.1, items for future consideration. Okay, moving on to 12.1 bylaws. Can mover and seconder to get the bylaws on the floor. Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That the bylaws listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. 2021-1, additional residential units. 221-2, interim tax levy bylaw. 221-03, temporary borrowing bylaw. 221-04, cemetery services agreement. 221-05, Elmville Queen Street sewage lift station contract. And 5000-330, Stone Manor Operating Corporation, Stone Manor Woods Phase 4. All those in favor? Is carried. Confirmatory bylaw, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Moore, Councillor Ma. The bylaw 2021-06 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on January 22, 21, listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That's carried. An adjournment motion, please. Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Cabral. That the regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 9:25 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting February 3rd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you. Stay safe.
Yep.
And
Happy New Year and see you later.
yep. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.